911. What's your emergency?
Shark! It's gone crazy! Help! Help! She's gone!
Stay calm. Tell me exactly what happened.
The cage, it tipped over. She's trapped. The sharks.
The sound of the waves is drowned by the heart-stopping silence that follows. The brutal reality of what happened hits as the camera pans to the open water, where a marine biologist's life was claimed by the very creature she loved and studied. What happened next would leave everyone in disbelief. Stay with us as we reveal how a routine dive turned into an unimaginable nightmare. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts below. The marine biologist at the heart of this tragedy, Dr. Jennifer Hale, was a passionate, well-meaning scientist who dedicated her life to the study and conservation of sharks. From a young age, she had been fascinated by these apex predators, and as she grew older, that fascination blossomed into a career marked by a deep emotional connection with the creatures she studied. Jennifer's colleagues often described her as the embodiment of compassion and enthusiasm, constantly advocating for the protection of sharks and working tirelessly to dispel the myths surrounding their aggressive nature. She wasn't just a researcher, she saw herself as a guardian of the ocean, convinced that sharks, like all creatures, were not inherently dangerous, but misunderstood. Her dedication was unparalleled, and she spent countless hours submerged in the ocean, studying the behavior of sharks firsthand. Through years of fieldwork, Jennifer believed that she had forged a unique bond with these majestic creatures. Her colleagues frequently remarked on her ability to get closer to the sharks than anyone else, attributing her success to a rare calmness and respect that the animals seemed to reciprocate. Jennifer insisted that sharks, particularly the great whites, had the capacity to understand and even communicate with humans. She spoke often of how she could read their behavior, interpreting subtle changes in their movements and expressions as a sign of trust, not aggression. This belief, though controversial, led her to push boundaries in ways few scientists would dare. She had become the face of shark research, a figure who inspired awe among some and skepticism among others. Her ability to dive into the water with great whites, without fear or protective barriers, had earned her a reputation as one of the leading experts in her field. Her most famous subject, a massive great white shark named Titan, was the animal at the center of her studies. Titan, a shark over 15 feet long and weighing more than 20 pounds, had been tracked and studied for years, and Jennifer had developed an intense bond with it. Despite its intimidating size and power, Titan had shown signs of trust toward Jennifer. For years, Titan had circled her dives, always maintaining a respectful distance, its movements slow and deliberate. There were times when Jennifer would lower her hand toward the creature, and it would nudge her gently with its snout, a sign that, in her mind, confirmed the bond they shared. She was often quoted as saying that Titan was the most gentle creature she had ever encountered. However, there were moments that hinted at Titan's true nature as a wild predator. Colleagues recalled seeing the shark act erratically on occasion, its behavior shifting unpredictably. While Jennifer dismissed these moments, attributing them to stress or an environmental trigger, others feared that she was too emotionally invested to recognize the danger. Titan, despite its apparent trust in Jennifer, was a Sharkan apex predator whose instincts could never be fully tamed. Still, Jennifer's connection to Titan remained the cornerstone of her life's work. She continued to swim with the shark, believing that her emotional bond had transcended the natural order, convinced that she was more than just a scientist. She was a protector, a figure of trust to this misunderstood beast of the deep. But little did she know, the very nature of Titan was waiting to be unleashed, and her faith in their connection would be her undoing. As Dr. Jennifer Hale's relationship with Titan grew deeper, her colleagues and wildlife experts began to express growing concern. Marine biologists, seasoned shark researchers, and even local authorities who had worked closely with her on numerous dives started noticing subtle but undeniable signs of aggression in Titan. During some dives, the shark's behavior became more erratic, circling more intense, its movements faster and more unpredictable. One experienced marine biologist, Dr. D.I. Helen Myers, who had observed Titan on several occasions, was particularly vocal about her concerns. She cautioned Jennifer that while Titan had shown trust in the past, sharks, especially great whites, were not domesticated creatures. There's a fine line between familiarity and complacency, Dr. Myers remarked. Titan's a predator. One moment of unpredictability could be fatal. But Jennifer brushed off these warnings. To her, the shark's occasional surges in behavior were simply misunderstandings, perhaps caused by environmental factors such as shifting currents or increased boat traffic in the area. She would often dismiss her colleagues' concerns with a reassuring smile, convinced that her bond with Titan was unlike any other human-shark relationship. She believed she had an almost intuitive understanding of the shark's moods and could anticipate its next move with near-perfect accuracy. "He's not like the others," Jennifer would say, referring to Titan. "We share something deeper, something they'll never understand." This belief in the safety of her connection with the shark led Jennifer to take increasingly risky decisions. She continued to dive with Titan without protective cages, even when the animal's behavior showed signs of aggression or when conditions were far from ideal. While other experts recommended waiting for the shark to calm down or allowing time for it to adjust to the presence of divers, Jennifer pushed forward. She believed that her calmness was enough to maintain control, that Titan would never harm her. As time passed, the warnings from her colleagues became more urgent. Dr. Marcus Lanning, a prominent shark expert who had worked with Jennifer in the past, spoke with a growing sense of unease. "I've seen this before," he said in one of his many phone calls to her. "When you start treating a predator like a pet, the danger doesn't decrease, it increases." But Jennifer, increasingly isolated in her belief, rejected these warnings. She had a reputation to uphold, and the more she dismissed her colleagues' concerns, the more her professional identity became tied to the idea of the tame shark. To Jennifer, her bond with Titan wasn't just a professional achievement, it was personal validation. Her refusal to acknowledge the shark's unpredictable nature was rooted in her own emotional attachment. She convinced herself that Titan's past behavior was all the proof she needed. There was no way that her beloved shark, the creature she had worked with and studied for so long, could ever betray her. It wasn't long before Jennifer's disregard for caution led to dangerous behavior that no one could ignore. As she continued to disregard expert warnings, Titan's aggression began to intensify, but Jennifer, resolute in her belief, kept diving deeper, pushing the limits of her once trusted connection. The morning had begun like any other. Jennifer Hale, suited in her dive gear, calmly prepared for what was supposed to be another routine dive with Titan. The ocean was unusually still, the waves barely disturbing the surface as Jennifer descended into the water, entering the protective cage with a sense of reassurance. Titan was nearby, circling lazily as Jennifer watched through the metal bars, convinced that her bond with the great shark made her safe, immune to the unpredictable danger lurking beneath the surface. The first few moments were serene, eerie calm that lulled everyone into a false sense of security. Jennifer, from inside the cage, gently extended her hand toward Titan, as if inviting him to nudge her once again. She had done it countless times before, and the shark had always responded with a slow, measured approach. But today was different. Without warning, Titan's behavior shifted dramatically. A low, primal growl resonated beneath the water, sending a sudden shiver down Jennifer's spine. Her calm demeanor faltered as she saw the shark's eyes narrow, its once patient circling now replaced with sharp, erratic movements. It was as though Titan had become a different creature its trust, once so unwavering, now replaced with a cold, calculated aggression. Before Jennifer could react, the shark lunged. In a fraction of a second, the cage shuddered violently as Titan collided with it, throwing Jennifer off balance. The metallic creaking of the cage filled the water, but it was drowned out by the terrifying sound of the shark's body crashing against the bars. Titan's powerful jaws clamped down, not on Jennifer, but on the cage itself, twisting and thrashing as it attempted to break through. The impact was enough to send the cage tilting, violently tipping to one side. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat as the world around her turned chaotic. Her hand, still gripping the bars, slipped as the cage shifted violently, throwing her off balance. The sudden shift of the cage sent her tumbling into the water, where she desperately flailed to find purchase in the now turbulent sea. The shark, its movements fast and erratic, surged forward, its massive body eclipsing the light as it circled Jennifer. Panic set in. The moment of connection Jennifer had felt with Titan evaporated in the face of raw, unchecked aggression. Her mind screamed for her body to act, but the water was too dark, too thick with chaos, and she was powerless against the strength of the creature she had trusted. The struggle escalated in the water. Titan's teeth flashed, inches from her body, as Jennifer desperately tried to scramble back into the cage, but it was too late. The shark lunged again, snapping its jaws with terrifying speed. This time, Jennifer felt the cold, crushing bite on her leg. The pain was excruciating, but it was nothing compared to the sheer terror of being pulled under, the pressure of the shark's grip relentless as it dragged her deeper into the abyss. Above the water, the horrified witnesses scrambled, eyes wide in disbelief. The frantic voice of a fellow diver cracked through the radio, shouting into the emergency line, "She's gone! It's too late! The shark's got her!" The chaos continued, with each moment drawing them deeper into the unfolding horror. Emergency teams were summoned, but the situation was dire. The shark's aggressive assault continued for what felt like an eternity, a relentless testament to the predatory nature that Jennifer had once believed she could tame. Her bond with Titan, so carefully cultivated, did nothing to prevent the violent end that awaited her. The seconds after the attack were a blur of frantic movement. The moment Jennifer Hale was pulled under, the dive team above the surface scrambled into action, radios crackling with urgency as the emergency protocols were set in motion. The sight of the upturned cage bobbing helplessly in the water sent shockwaves through the team. They rushed to deploy the rescue boats, but the situation was complicated by the ferocious presence of Titan still circling the area with unsettling patience. The marine biologists and rescue divers worked quickly, their movements a blur as they prepared to enter the water and retrieve Jennifer's cage. But the ocean, as if mirroring Titan's aggression, was turbulent and unforgiving. The team deployed a secondary cage and began the painstaking process of pulling Jennifer's cage back to the surface. Every minute felt like an eternity, and despite their efforts, the waiting water, darkened by blood and terror, made the rescue increasingly difficult. Divers entered the water to assess the scene, but were forced to retreat repeatedly as Titan, undeterred and aggressive, swam in ever-widening circles around them. The shark's proximity made it clear that retrieving Jennifer's body would be no easy task. Finally, after what felt like hours, the cage was pulled to the surface, but it was too late. Jennifer Hale, the woman who had dedicated her life to understanding and protecting sharks, was dead. The team could only stand by in silence, the weight of their failure heavy in the thick air. Despite their desperate attempts, they could not save her in time. The images of her upturned cage, drifting helplessly in the water, would haunt them forever. News of the attack spread quickly. The tragedy dominated headlines, filling every media outlet with updates and analysis. In the hours that followed, the world watched as the story unfolded. A once promising marine biologist, beloved by colleagues and researchers alike, had been killed by the very animal she had spent her life studying. She was the voice of reason in a sea of misconceptions about sharks. Said one of her closest colleagues, "Her death is not just a personal loss, it's a loss for the entire scientific community." In interviews, experts expressed their shock and sorrow at the loss, but also hinted at the complexities surrounding Jennifer's approach to shark behavior. Dr. Biologist Marcus Lanning, a renowned shark expert who had known Jennifer for years, shared his disbelief. Jennifer was one of the most dedicated scientists I've ever met, but her belief that she could tame these wild creatures, it was a fatal misunderstanding of their true nature. The public reaction was swift and divided. On one side, there was a flood of sympathy for Jennifer's tragic end, with many expressing grief at the loss of a woman who had championed sharks as misunderstood creatures. But the attack also sparked fierce ethical debates. Should humans be allowed to interact so closely with wild, dangerous animals? Was it ethical to treat apex predators like pets, especially when they were capable of such primal violence? Animal rights activists, marine conservationists, and the general public were torn. Some called for stricter regulations regarding shark research, while others advocated for the continued protection of these majestic animals, questioning whether the tragedy could have been avoided through better education and caution. The questions lingered. Had Jennifer's bond with Titan been miscalculated, or was this simply the brutal reality of engaging with nature's deadliest predators? The debate over humanity's place in the natural world was only just beginning. The tragic death of Dr. Jennifer Hale raised immediate questions about the nature of the shark attack and whether it could have been avoided. Experts were quick to weigh in on the situation, shedding light on the behavior of sharks and how even the most tamed animals retain their wild instincts. Marine biologists were quick to explain that sharks, even those that have been tracked, studied, and interacted with over time, are inherently unpredictable. Apex predators like great whites are not domesticated or easily tamed in the human sense. While sharks can appear to demonstrate tolerance or even curiosity toward humans, these interactions should never be misinterpreted as friendship or trust. Dr. Helen Myers, a marine biologist specializing in shark behavior, elaborated on the phenomenon of habituation in animals. Habituation occurs when an animal becomes accustomed to a particular stimulus and starts to ignore it, she explained. In Jennifer's case, Titan may have become used to her presence, but that doesn't eliminate the animal's instincts. If anything, it could have heightened Titan's sense of dominance in its environment. This concept of habituation helps explain the shark's sudden aggression. Titan, familiar with Jennifer and her presence in the water, may have let down its guard in ways that allowed it to perceive Jennifer as prey or a threat. As a predator, Titan's aggression was never entirely eliminated. It was only muted by the biologist's constant proximity. When Jennifer's hand extended toward Titan, it likely triggered an instinctive response, a territorial or predatory reaction to something that entered its immediate space. The shark's attack was not a malicious one, but rather an example of instinct overriding previous behavior. The tragedy stemmed from the fact that Jennifer, despite all her years of research and her bond with Titan, failed to recognize the animal's true nature. It wasn't that the shark suddenly turned violent, it was that Jennifer ignored the fundamental reality of what she was dealing with, an apex predator that would always prioritize its instincts over any emotional bond. Experts also pointed to human error as a crucial factor in the attack. Jennifer's belief that she could communicate with the shark clouded her judgment and led her to dismiss any warnings. She had anthropomorphized Titan, attributing human-like emotions and understanding to a creature that operates purely on primal instincts. This is a common issue in human-animal interactions, especially when the human involved becomes emotionally invested in the animal. It's easy to fall into the trap of seeing an animal as a person, said Dr. Marcus Lanning, a shark behavior specialist. When we do that, we misread their behavior and lose sight of the reality that we are dealing with a wild animal that doesn't think or act like us. Jennifer's repeated assertion that Titan was her friend blinded her to the risk of treating a shark as if it were a domesticated pet. The bond she believed existed was a false construct, shaped by her emotional attachment to the animal. The failure to recognize Titan's unpredictable nature ultimately led to her tragic end, as the line between affection and danger became increasingly blurred. The attack serves as a stark reminder that, despite our best intentions, humans cannot tame the wild instincts of apex predators. In the wake of Dr. Jennifer Hale's tragic death, the fate of Titan, the great white shark responsible for the attack, became a subject of intense debate and scrutiny. Despite the tragedy, Titan's survival in the wild was never truly in question. As a wild predator, Titan's instincts remained intact, and it was no more a danger than any other apex predator in the ocean. However, because the shark had been associated with the attack on Jennifer, many questioned whether it should be removed from the area or treated as a threat to humans. In the days following the incident, authorities worked to track Titan's movements in the wild, using the data collected over years of monitoring to understand its behavior. Some wildlife experts advocated for Titan's removal from the area, arguing that any shark involved in an attack on a human should be considered a risk. However, others, including marine conservationists and shark researchers, pushed back, emphasizing that Titan had not sought out Jennifer with malice and that its actions were driven by instinct, not aggression. "We cannot demonize an animal for acting according to its nature," one marine biologist stated. This was a tragic accident, but not an isolated case of a man-eating shark. Ultimately, authorities chose not to remove Titan, deciding instead to continue tracking its movements. The shark was monitored closely, with several experts claiming that it showed no further signs of aggression toward humans. Still, the incident had irrevocably altered the public's perception of the animal. The attack sparked a flurry of legal and ethical debates. Animal rights groups, conservationists, and wildlife management organizations found themselves at odds over how to handle similar interactions between humans and wild animals. Some argued that humans should not be allowed to engage so closely with apex predators in the wild. "This is a case of human intrusion," said one prominent animal rights activist. "Jennifer, despite her good intentions, put herself in a dangerous position by treating a predator as if it were a domesticated animal. This incident should be a wake-up call to rethink how we interact with wildlife." On the other hand, shark conservation groups vehemently opposed any punitive measures against Titan. They warned that the real threat to sharks was not the animals themselves, but rather human encroachment on their habitats. "Sharks are not the problem," said one advocate. "The real issue is that humans continue to invade and disrupt ecosystems that were never meant to be interacted with in such a way." Meanwhile, wildlife authorities, in collaboration with marine researchers, responded by tightening regulations around shark dive tourism. There were immediate discussions about the safety protocols in place for shark-related tourism, with suggestions for stronger cage designs, more stringent dive regulations, and enhanced public education on shark behavior. Additionally, the incident prompted new legal frameworks for monitoring and controlling human interaction with marine predators. Shark dive operators were required to implement more rigorous safety standards, and greater emphasis was placed on the potential risks posed by close encounters with apex predators. The debate over Titan's fate continued to simmer for months, with the public divided between those who saw the shark as a natural predator and those who saw it as a threat to humanity. Despite the ongoing controversy, Titan remained in the wild, its fate intertwined with that of the ocean's most misunderstood creatures, caught between the instinct to survive and the consequences of human interaction. The death of Dr. Jennifer Hale stands as a tragic reminder of the stark and unforgiving line between humanity and the wild. Despite her passion, her years of dedication, and her unyielding belief in the bond she shared with Titan, Jennifer was ultimately a victim of her own miscalculations. She had spent her life advocating for the understanding and protection of sharks, but in doing so, she had allowed her emotional attachment to cloud her judgment. In her desire to bridge the gap between humans and one of the ocean's most formidable predators, she had inadvertently ignored the inherent risks that came with interacting so closely with a wild animal. Titan, the great white shark, was not a domesticated pet, nor was it capable of the loyalty and understanding that Jennifer had projected onto it. The shark's actions were governed not by malice, but by instinct, and instinct that, in this case, proved to be deadly. Jennifer's tragic end underscores the dangers of underestimating the raw, untamable forces of nature. No matter how many times she had dived with Titan, no matter how many gentle nudges the shark had given her, the fundamental truth remained: the wild cannot be tamed by affection, nor can its primal instincts be overcome by human empathy. This tragedy should serve as a cautionary tale for anyone who believes they can control or predict the behavior of wild animals, no matter how well-intentioned or experienced they may be. The wild is not a place of affection or compromise, it is a place of survival, and those who enter it must respect that. Jennifer's mistake was in believing that her bond with Titan had superseded the shark's natural instincts. She had become so entwined with her work that she failed to see the inherent danger in treating a predator like a companion. The consequences of that oversight were devastating, not just for Jennifer, but for the legacy she had built. The final lesson, then, is a simple yet powerful one. The wild does not care for human affection, it only follows its instincts. We must respect the true nature of animals, no matter how close we think we are. While Jennifer's death is an undeniable tragedy, it serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of understanding and respecting the forces of nature, no matter how deeply we feel connected to them.